Hey Duska, how are you?
Hi, Raina. I'm well. Good to see you again.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I know within your busy schedule of being super mom and running a very successful business that you do, I know you're quite stretched. So thank you so much for taking time to talk to our listeners today. Because I mean, in this evolving, stressful corporate lifestyle, I think we need more individuals like you that really foster and promote that positive mindset. So just a little bit about Dr. Duska Tadic, who's joined us today. And thank you again, Duska. Duska has over 15 years in private practice. She's the director of life psychology and has a number of consulting roles to clinical practices and is a board-approved supervisor for psychology graduates. Her skills also extend to coaching professionals in their career lifespan to maintain a positive mindset in the ever-evolving, stressful corporate environment. So thank you, Duska, for joining us.
Thank you, Raina. No, I remember the last time I was here, we were in the middle of a lockdown, if you remember, and
yes,
all things mental health and how to overcome the challenges at that time. And thank goodness we're kind of past that now.
that phase, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
A lot of the things that we discussed obviously still continues to be really relevant in today's environment, and with, you know, the way things are going with the economic climate and just the ongoing stress and anxiety that people are facing across all professions.
Exactly. And you probably heard as well, there's, you know, the big tech giants at the moment have laid off numerous staff. There's a lot of anxiety and a lot of insecurity in a number of workplaces. That includes a number of our clients as well. So I think being able to share you know, your thought process on how to manage that. And I mean, I know you specialize. If you could just tell us a little bit about your, you know, your speciality and where exactly you're adding most value and the kind of individuals you really help when it comes, because I know anxiety is your speciality. So
yeah. Well, look, as you mentioned, I've been in private practice over 15 years. So since I finished my PhD, I went straight into private practice and have been working with a range of individuals, you know, from children through to adults, across, you know, with a number of different conditions, but mostly anxiety and depression, which is what we tend to see presenting the most in private practice. And yeah, I think in the last few years, my focus has kind of shifted more to that supervision space, and as well as the corporate sphere, because there's been a huge emphasis on mental health in the workplace. And there just hasn't been a lot of psychologists that have kind of focused on that area. So there's a big need for it. So yeah, that's where I've kind of been focusing on, looking at the psychosocial risk factors in the workplace and kind of coaching individuals on ways to overcome just the everyday stress that we all experience, and how to manage all the demands of life and career that we're faced with now. So it's using the same principles that, you know, we apply, I guess, with people who present with mental health disorders, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, which really looks at the way that we think, you know, our mindset and our beliefs are really key to how we feel and the behaviors that we kind of engage in, whether it's personally, you know, in our personal lives or in our professional lives. So it's the same kind of principles, but more focused at prevention and getting in early, and giving people the tools that are evidence-based, that we know that work before things get too hard, as well as, like always, breaking down the stigma of mental health, right? Because that still exists, and in some professions more so than others. So we're constantly working on breaking down that stigma and normalizing mental health, and giving people the tools to live happy and meaningful and successful lives.
Exactly. And I think it's also that self-awareness piece. But I mean, the core of our empowering series is for our listeners and our audience to understand what sales looks like in the future. And I think that aligns with, you know, everything you'd like to share today, which is that whole mindset piece, right?
Yeah.
You don't have that, you have nothing really. You can't really cope. So I think just having someone like yourself with your expertise sharing that insight, but also being available to individuals and having access to yourself is so crucial. I know there's we spoke a lot about mindset the last time, but I mean, what exactly is mindset, and why do you think it really matters?
Yeah, look, mindset is essentially the lens through which we view the world. So it's kind of the group of the beliefs and expectations that we hold that shapes the way that we view the world, which then affects the decisions and the behaviors that we engage in. So it's that awareness piece, as you mentioned. We all have a particular, it's almost like a software system in our brain that we've developed through our early life experiences. And so this lens that we view the world through can really impact the way that we perceive things, and how we respond to that. So you may have heard a lot in the literature around there's two types of mindset, the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. And there's been a lot of research done on this, and a professor at Stanford University, Dr. Carol Dweck.
Carol Dweck. Yeah, I was going to say, I've read her book. It's amazing.
Yeah, you read her book. Yeah, and she summarizes all of the research, which I won't do today. I'm going to keep it very simple, but there are these two types of mindsets, and we know that people who have a fixed mindset, which is essentially believing that our core abilities and talents and intelligence is fixed and unchangeable. It's kind of like, well, I'm either good at this or I'm not, or I've got it or I don't, people who have that kind of mindset tend to then view things around them through that lens, and they may not engage in challenges or taking risks as much, because they think, well, what's the point? If my abilities are fixed, there's no point in even trying. So that mindset is crucial, because it affects whether someone will put themselves out of their comfort zone. It will affect whether someone, goes for new experiences, and puts themselves out there. Whereas someone with a growth mindset is more likely to kind of accept failure and setbacks and put themselves out there, because they believe at the core of their mindset is that anything I put my mind to, I can learn. My abilities and skills, they can grow. They are not fixed. Does that make sense? So it's really this core belief that then has a huge impact on the outcomes that we can see in our life. Because if we believe that we can do it and we can grow and we can change, then we'll put ourselves out there and we will learn and grow. Whereas if we have that more kind of fixed mindset, then we're not likely to put ourselves out there. So it is really crucial being aware of our mindset. And as we can kind of talk about in terms of neuroplasticity.
Yes. I think that's the piece that I wanted to talk to you about today, because that's there's a lot of people talking about neuroplasticity, and I think getting someone like yourself and your expertise and your thoughts around it, more so our following are predominantly sales professionals, sales leaders, individuals that and sales as a career is a completely different. The individuals working within that space are a totally different beast, because having that mindset is so important for them. So for them to understand this from someone like yourself, just to help them with how the evolving world of sales and what the future is going to look like, and having this knowledge, I think will be so useful. So if you could share with our, following a little bit about what exactly is neuroplasticity, because not everyone does know what that is, and the role of it really in improving your mindset.
Well, I think it's interesting. One of the key points is that by the age of like 35, 40, 95% of what we do is habit, right? So it's, so it's like this set of thoughts and beliefs and behaviors that we just kind of repeat over and over, and this happens because the way the brain functions, and this is where kind of neuroplasticity comes in, is the brain likes to make heuristics and shortcuts, because we're bombarded with so much information on a daily basis, and there's so much processing that goes on. So wherever possible, our brain will try to take shortcuts and make connections. And so you may have heard of that term, neurons that fire together wire together. So essentially what that means is if we like always think, like if you think about, if you wake up and you do the same thing in the same way every day, you end up having the same thoughts and the same emotional reaction to that situation. So that becomes like a neural pathway, right? Our brain goes, well, I know that when I wake up or when I show up to this meeting or when I go to work today, this is what happens. And so this becomes a habit, and 95% of what we do is just subconscious, which means that only 5% of what we're doing, we're conscious of. And so we know that with neuroplasticity is that we can change our habits because our brain has this capacity to form new neural pathways, right? And that's the key message. That's at the core of it. And so the question then is, well, how do we create these new neural pathways? And the main way to do that is to be more intentional with the way that we think and what we do, right? It's because a lot of what we do is habit and it's so automatic, right? And so it's creating that pause to think, okay, well, if I want to create a change in my job or my mindset, how would I be thinking if I was more positive, or if I was braver or more confident? What actions would I be taking? And kind of already imagining that as a reality. Because the minute we imagine it, our brain realizes that that's like a possibility. And then that can change our emotional responses and our behaviors. Yeah.
Okay. So that's what it is pretty much. Is that, so it's basically, I mean, they talk about it where you can picture your life, you have a vision and you picture it, right? And how you're going to get, so that's exactly what this is, to help that change in you're doing the same thing, you're going to get the same result. But then if you do something different and just picturing how you do it differently, it is to get your brain to get wired to have that outcome is pretty much
exactly.
Okay.
But what's important, I guess, from that psychological perspective to understand is that when we start to do that, our minds and bodies will be in a bit of a disconnect because we're already wired to think a particular way. When we start to think differently, our body will start to feel uncomfortable, and our emotions be like, oh, that's not familiar, that's a bit scary, or that's different, I don't know how to do that. So that's when we start to change our mindset. Actually, initially it can be a little bit hard because it feels a bit overwhelming. It doesn't feel familiar. And so I guess the message is to just be aware of that and realize that just because we feel that way doesn't mean we need to back out of this decision that we're making. Our body is kind of reacting that way because that's how it's usually used to responding, right? We do this, like we show up to this situation, the brain fires a sequence of this sequence fires in the same way, and so anytime we start to make one change, it can take a little bit of time for these new neural pathways to form.
It's that really uncomfortable feeling. So with your expertise, Dr. Duska, I mean, what do you think we can do to manage that uncomfortable feeling, right? I mean, because that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So what do we do to manage that?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, it's building that awareness and just noticing where we're feeling it, in our body, and just accepting the discomfort. And in order to kind of ride out that anxiety or the discomfort, we need to kind of keep our goals in mind. So having really clearly defined goals of where we're going, why we want to go there, can help us persevere through challenges and setbacks and the discomfort. So that's a really important one, is kind of checking in with ourselves and knowing, well, why are we, working on our mindset? What is it that I'm trying to achieve here? What are my goals? So that's a really important one. Another one is, we call it cognitive restructuring, being aware of the negative or unhelpful thoughts that we're having in that moment. So, you might feel your heart racing or just feel that self-doubt racing through your mind, and just pausing and kind of pulling those thoughts out and going, well, are these thoughts or are they facts? And challenging that belief, because again, like I said, 95% of what we think is just automatic. It comes from our early life experiences and the way that we've been wired. So learning to notice the thoughts and challenge them is a really key important, is an important skill to be able to overcome that. Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, what in your expertise, what do you think are some positive psychology tools for individuals that, I mean, especially sales professionals? I mean, it's a very, very highly stressed career.
Yeah.
Right? And I think sometimes you're right that even if they're trying to work on changing their thought process, it's difficult, especially when when they aren't getting to their aren't reaching quota for the quarter, or it could be they're really behind, and the economic climate isn't really supporting it. It is a very they've got a family to feed. They've got, I mean, this is really connecting with, I mean, there's a lot of people's jobs out there that are, that potentially could be questioned if they aren't hitting targets, especially in sales, right? In sales, it's all about you're as good as your last sale.
Yeah.
You're forgotten after. So to maintain that consistently, you can understand, can be very highly stressful. And I mean, I think having those tools that they can just know are available. A lot of people know that they're there, but from your expertise, what do you think? How do they keep those tools front of mind, and what are they?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to kind of rehash what you said there is around sales professionals. Absolutely, it's a really highly stressful, challenging, profession, and for many reasons. One is, as you said, the pressure to kind of meet targets and quotas, and that that time within a particular amount of time. There's also a lot of rejection that you face.
Definitely. Right? So I don't call it rejection. I call it a conversation, because there's not always a need. There's not always the same match. So you just walk away knowing that, yeah.
And that's, I mean, I love the way that you use that language, and that's a positive psychology tool, is looking at the language that we use. So yes, labeling it as rejection is not helpful, but a lot of people might see it that way, in that moment. And if then they don't make that sale or don't meet that quota, they see it as a rejection. But that's the reality, is that for, every 5 sales, there might have been 10 that didn't go through. And so it's learning to face that, and kind of accepting that as part of the job. And also in sales, I think, a lot of the job, deals and whatnot can be quite drawn out at sometimes, right? So there's a lot of,
depending on the cycle of the sale and the type of selling and how complex it is. Each cycle is different, and this is where I think having individuals like yourself with your expertise to kind of coach and work with people when they're in stressful environments, surrounding themselves with mentors, with like-minded people, great positive psychology and content. It's it's so crucial, especially in a stressful environment. And I think where you guys are talking about the whole neuroplasticity and improving just your mindset, it's a really big awareness piece, because I don't think every sales professional ever knows that word, to be honest.
No, absolutely. And it is a bit of a, pop psychology thing. Oh, neuroplasticity, what does it actually mean, and how does it apply to me? And so it is important to kind of know that we can change. I see a lot of people who just think they feel really stuck and they're not sure how to move forward, and like, this is just how I am. And we talk a lot about, you can change your habits, you can change your neural pathways. And what that means is you can change your automatic thinking processes. It doesn't happen straight away, but if we can practice, like I said before, think about, where do you want to be? How might that feel? Why do you want to get there? Break down the behaviors that you would need to engage in to get there. And at each step of the way, notice the discomfort, notice the thoughts that come up. Ask yourself, is this a realistic or helpful thought? What's a better way to think about it? And so the more that you do that, closer you kind of get to your goal, and that pattern becomes more automatic. The big thing, like I said, with sales too, is the sitting with the uncertainty, because you are sitting, and especially in the current economic climate, there's so much uncertainty about our jobs, about where the next sale is going to come from, like what company is going to collapse next, you know? So it's about learning to sit with uncertainty, which means noticing it in your body and making sure that we're not just focusing on work all the time, you know, having really healthy habits out of work, you know, hobbies and things that we enjoy that are aligned with our values and, you know, our sense of self-worth. Because the thing is, a lot of people get their majority of their sense of self-worth through their jobs, you know, in their professional identity is a huge part of their self-worth. But if we're only relying on our work to fulfill that need, you know, we can feel really devastated when a sale doesn't go through or something goes, you know, a challenge occurs at work. So making sure we're balancing that through working on other areas of our lives, our relationships, you know, our health, you know, self-development and hobbies and things like that. So having those things to focus on can help ease that pressure.
I think that was some really good advice there, Duska. So, you know, regarding positive habits and, you know, listening to content that's going to get you to think differently and wire your mindset to do things differently. I think that's also important. So some really great positive tools there on you know, how to improve your mindset and just having those, having that toolbox available, but also surrounding yourself, I think, around, you know, like-minded people that are doing that, or, you know, that probably are in a very stressful situation and environment and are doing things differently to manage that. I think that's so important. It's real basics, but I think sometimes just being front of mind on that it is available is so important.
Sure. Social support and
totally.
relationships is a really main one. So always staying connected and you know, to your managers, building relationships with your customers and the team around you can really help offset the stress as well.
I agree. But I mean, a lot of times you can feel quite devalued and disconnected because there's a lack of communication with your managers, and there's you know, you really don't know what's happening at that top end because it hasn't been communicated across, or there's a lot of uncertainty up there, and that creates a lot of anxiety. For sales professionals, how do you feel they should manage that? Because they really don't know what's happening and what decisions are made at that top level from a senior leadership perspective. It hasn't been communicated across.
Well, look, anxiety is all about attention. You know, it's where we choose to focus our attention. So, you know, that's a hard situation like that, where someone might be noticing that something's going on, you know, in the top end and they're not sure. And, you know, so there's a lot of anxiety, uncertainty. And so I often say to people, well, let's get into the problem solving mode, because worrying is a waste of time, you know. So if we focus all our attention on all the worries and the what ifs and trying to make sense of something that we don't really know much about, that just increases our stress. So pausing and going, well, firstly, is this something I can control or do anything about? If the answer is yes, make a list of all the possible things that you could do. It might be setting up a meeting with your manager to voice your concerns. It might be reaching out to a coach or a mentor and talking about, you know, your worries and your concerns and getting some kind of other advice from them. You know, it might be, getting some of your own individual coaching around assertiveness or communication skills if you feel like that's something that's lacking for you or that you need help with. So getting to that problem solving state and going, well, can I do anything about it? If yes, here are some options and where can I start? So it's about feeling in control. People feel overwhelmed and anxious when they feel really out of control. And so if we can focus our attention on the things that we can control in the here and now, that really helps manage the anxiety. It doesn't mean that it solves the problem immediately. You know, there might still be that uncertainty on that top end, but it's about reminding ourselves, well, okay, what's within my control? And I'm doing all that I can.
Yeah.
And that can help people feel a bit more empowered.
I think when you mentioned this quite clearly, and I've said this from a leadership perspective, You spoke about values. You spoke about, so I think when, you've done what you can and you still don't feel, sometimes you join an organization that doesn't resonate your values, you don't feel heard, so I think sometimes removing yourself from, would you agree that removing yourself from that, so you find an opportunity that will value you more, that resonates with your, taking yourself out of that to, could also help, because I see this quite often in sales professionals where they've been underperforming sales professionals in one business because their values didn't align. They go to another business and they're the top salesperson there.
Absolutely.
And the number one on the selling board. So I do feel your type of environment really does make or break you sometimes.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And so putting things in perspective is really important. And again, you can see how fixed and growth mindset can come into there, because if someone has that fixed mindset, they'll think, well, it's me, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good enough, or I don't, fit in, my communication style is not great. And they might not be just brave enough to make that change because they have a very fixed mindset around their abilities. Whereas if we can have a growth mindset and think, okay, well, what has this experience in this company taught me?
Yeah.
Maybe I don't want to work in a company that's not aligned to my values. I can't accept X, Y, or Z. So, hey, I can use my skills elsewhere, or I can look for other opportunities. So that growth mindset and that openness can, open up people to far better opportunities. And
I think the growth mindset also, especially for salespeople, it really helps with keeping their confidence levels up as well, because it gets them thinking and gets them wired differently to think differently, releasing really, positive endorphins and things like that. I think it's so important. No, I agree completely, Dr. Duska. Just out of, for salespeople, I mean, what would you like to leave them with? What are the top tips you think sales professionals need to keep abreast when it comes to improving their mindset?
Well, firstly, I think just to recognize that salespeople are people just like everyone else. And I know that traditionally there was this stigma around salespeople being extremely extroverted, overly confident,
arrogant.
Yes, infallible to emotions. I want people to know that sales is an emotional job. There's so many highs and lows, and we can't take the emotion out of the job. So accepting that and using that as to motivate them rather than to, hold them back. So embracing the emotional part of the job and letting go of that stigma, because, hey, human beings, we have a range of emotions and we all respond to stress in the same way, whether we're in sales or not. So being kind to themselves, recognizing the early warning signs of stress and burnout, and stepping back and really connecting to their values, asking themselves what is important, what is it that I can control, what are my overarching goals, and then what are my thoughts and beliefs that perhaps might be getting in the way of me achieving those. So it's about being proactive then, that's that kind of self-awareness, knowledge and self-awareness piece, and then being proactive around setting good habits in and outside of work, which means being aware of our thinking, which means, exercising, connecting with people that uplift us, getting mentoring and coaching, and, continuing to learn and just not give up, and seeing every challenge as an opportunity to grow, really.
Yeah, and I agree. And it also comes down to, you clean eating and making you feel better with it's just the basics, right?
All those basics we can't, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we've got the self-actualization at the top, which is, when we can really live a life filled with meaning and purpose. That's at the top of the pyramid. At the bottom is sleep and shelter and safety and food, right? And then all relationships, and we build up. So we can't expect to be at the top of the pyramid if the basics are not met. Foundation is not 100%. There, right? Yeah.
100%. No, I think you're 100% right. So I think that's brilliant. It's very important to understand, how important coaching is. So if you could, share with us, Dr. Duska, why you believe coaching is so important and the value of it.
Yeah, well, look, coaching is great because it's really personalized.
And that's one-on-one coaching, not your group coaching. You recommend one-on-one.
Well, look, we do group coaching for organizations if there's particular skills or training they want for their team. But in general, it's the one-on-one coaching for executives can be really, is the most effective for them, because it helps them connect with and work on their own personal goals. And everyone, the first part of coaching is really doing a good assessment of where is the person at, what skills and tools do they already have, and that helps us develop a personalized plan on kind of targeting the key skills that individual needs in order to succeed. So, one part of coaching is actually creating that space for people to understand themselves better, and because a lot of people don't really know where to start. They kind of know they need to make a change, but they're not quite sure where they need to make a start. So coaching can be helpful in that sense, helping them figure that out. But other people will come to coaching knowing, look, I just really need to improve my communication skills, or I just really need to, improve my mindset or manage my anxiety. And we can work specifically on that. Yeah. So it really is providing that space for them to explore their values and their goals and what specific skills they need in order to succeed moving forward. Yeah.
Look, I think, everyone needs a coach. And I think if you'd like to find out a bit more about how Dr. Duska can help you there, I mean, at least to have an exploratory chat, there'll be a link to Dr. Duska's LinkedIn profile. So you can connect with her and request to have at least an exploratory chat on how she can help you. But I know you're in the process of creating your own online course, right? Can you share, I mean, or you may not want to, but can you share a little bit about what that's going to be and how that can help professionals out there?
Yeah, look, we're kind of in the research stage of trying to collect data and information about what would be the most helpful content. We know that a lot of people are time poor, and showing up for one-on-one coaching sessions regularly can be challenging. And so we know that one-on-one is really effective, like I said, but for some people as an adjunct, it can be really helpful to just have an online course where they can do at their own pace, just to supplement what they're doing in their one-on-one coaching. Yeah. So the course will be around mindset, essentially, and just optimization, how to optimize our skills and optimize our mindset to achieve the most success. But yeah, so I'm really open to, if anyone wants to send me a message after this, really open to suggestions as well around particular modules and topics that especially in the sales environment, that you feel would be really beneficial. So a colleague and I are working on this course together, and she's also working for a number of corporates in New Zealand. So we thought we would collaborate and come up with a course for these executives, just to help boost their performance and motivation, and give them the tools for success. So please do reach out. I always love connecting with people and getting ideas and feedback. So thanks, Raina.
Thank you. Thank you so much again for your time, Duska. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of our clients and candidates out there will find this very useful. But again, if you've got questions for Duska, I know she's a really busy lady, but I'm sure she'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. And again, any suggestions that you've got for her and her colleague when she's building this course, she's all about adding as much value. From the little I've known Duska, I know that she's all about adding maximum value. So I know this course will be fantastic. And I know this whole corporate space, I think just for you can add a lot of value. So thank you again for taking the time to do this with us today.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.